Hey everybody, welcome. Welcome back to the Palenque Norte speaker series. We're super excited to have Annie here. Annie Oak is the founder of the Women's Visionary Congress, which highlights the women who work with entheogens and also hosts a beautiful conference. She's also founder of the Full Circle Tea House, which is right next door. I believe Jay's serving some tea over here. So without further ado, here's Annie Oak.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming to the Palenque Norte speaker series, and hopefully after this is done, we can go next door to the Full Circle Tea House and have some tea. So this is my home camp, and I am serving tea next door with the Full Circle crew, which is a really beautiful group of people. And this evening, I wanted to talk a little bit about psychedelics and working with our shadow side, and also about sex. I've been wanting to talk about psychedelics and sex for a long time. Yeah, I'm getting a little hand waving in the background. All right. So this talk is called Future Pleasures in Feminine Entheogenic Spaces. And I wanted to talk about how we seek pleasure with psychedelics, both embodied and unembodied, and how we can do more of that and how it might benefit our lives. So I want to start by pointing out that generally, we're a society that has kind of a funny attitude towards pleasure. We sort of distrust pleasure, yet we're pleasure-seeking creatures. And we take pretty extraordinary lengths to feel pleasure in our lives. The two most prescribed pharmaceuticals ever in the world are, can you guess? SSRIs, antidepressants, and Viagra. That's right. So a shockingly high number of people in the United States and other parts of the world take pharmaceuticals to ease their symptoms of depression, elevate their moods, and have sex. So let's think about this for a second. We have these pharmaceutical companies who are making a whole lot of money out of our seeking of pleasure through altered states of consciousness. And here we are as a psychedelic community who have other tools to seek these states of pleasure that are different from what the pharmaceutical companies are offering us. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to look at the potential for some of these substances. I'll tell a couple of stories about my personal erotic encounters with psychedelics. And then we'll figure out where we might go from here into our other future states of pleasure with substances that can really bring us to interesting and ecstatic spaces. So let's talk about SSRIs for a second. A lot of people take antidepressants. SSRIs, heavily prescribed, especially for women. As it turns out, women take more SSRIs than men. Older women take more SSRIs than younger women. When women get to be a little bit older, they're encouraged to take estrogen to prolong their estrogenic states, and prescribed a lot of mood-enhancing and antidepressant drugs. Now, the problem with SSRIs, of course, is they completely flatten your libido, right? So you're going to elevate your mood, maybe feel a little less depressed, but your sexual life is just going to completely take a nosedive. It's just going to flatten you right out. Now, when you think about that for a second, that's very contradictory, right? So you feel a little bit better, but your erotic life is just not happening. And I've had a lot of friends who have gone through this experience where they've stabilized on their mood, but they're just not connecting with their erotic selves, and so that makes them kind of depressed. And so they take more SSRIs. It's like, this is really interesting. So I think that certain types of psychedelic substances can really enhance our sexual lives. So let's do a quick inventory of some of these substances and what they can do for us as an alternative to antidepressants that are prescribed by doctors and offered by pharmaceutical companies. So the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is MDMA. MDMA is a very interesting substance for really opening the heart, for making connections with people, for forgiveness, for really connecting deeply on a personal and spiritual and sexual level with people. It's really great for couples therapy. It's really interesting as a tool to resolve conflict between people. I just heard a really beautiful story today about a couple who just had a child together, and people who have children, often their sexual lives go through some real challenges because they're pouring all their energy into this baby, this new being, and raising that child and taking care of that child, and they're not getting a lot of sleep, and it's very stressful on relationships. And so this couple decided to really rekindle their sexual and intimate relationship with MDMA session, and apparently it was quite successful, and they were able to really reconnect with each other in a really profound way, and to their benefit, and of course to the benefit of their entire family, which is really important when you're trying to raise a healthy family. You want to have a strong connection between your mother and your father. So I see this as an opportunity to not only enhance couples' sexual lives, but to build healthy families, people who really care for each other and can really address conflict and work on their relationships. And I think there's a lot of potential for MDMA-assisted therapy. Of course, there are now studies ongoing for MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD, and the early results are extremely promising for people with PTSD, many returning veterans, people who have been sexually assaulted, especially women who've been sexually assaulted. And I think that research is going to bear a lot of fruit because it's treatment-resistant PTSD that they're really using MDMA for. So people who are disconnected from their erotic and sexual lives because of sexual trauma, because of PTSD of various sorts, it really allows them to access those places where they're traumatized and be in that moment and then get past it. And I think that's going to be a really helpful tool for a lot of people. I really look forward to the day when MDMA-assisted therapy is legal and accessible for everybody. And I think that day is coming, and that we'll see that day, and it will really change the way that people work through their traumas and enhance their lives. I also think that other psychedelic substances can be really interesting on an erotic level, and in a way that's not necessarily immediately obvious. A lot of people are discovering the world of ayahuasca. Many people are speaking here in the speaker series about their encounters with ayahuasca, and the growing number of people are journeying to Latin America, working with shamans, having intense ayahuasca experiences. And most of the experiences that people relay with ayahuasca are very intensely personal. They often encounter entities, and Mama Ayahuasca is often perceived as a healing feminine entity that allows people to, again, address trauma in their lives and really open themselves up to the full possibility of who they are, and move into a fuller realization of their potential. I want to talk about my erotic experience with ayahuasca because I don't hear much about that. The first time I took ayahuasca, I was in a very safe place. I was working with really beautiful guys who were lovely shamans. I trusted them. They did a beautiful ceremony. It was exquisite, and I felt really challenged by it because if you've done ayahuasca, it's a purgative. It makes you throw up, and you're on your hands and knees, and you're like, okay, Vine, you've got my full attention. You've got my full attention. What's the message here? And so I was kind of in that place. I was sort of in a difficult place and doing a lot of purging and I went outside to pee, and I just couldn't bring myself to go back inside. I knew that I was supposed to, because the ayahuasqueros were very clear that you needed to be inside the space. But honestly, I just wanted to crawl underneath a bush and put my belly on the ground and just connect with the earth and just hug the surface of the ground and ground myself out. Didn't want to be inside. So right near the entrance to this structure that we were in, I crawled underneath a bush and flattened myself against the ground. And then I had this vision, and suddenly I was cold because I was outdoors and I wasn't really dressed properly, and I wasn't lying on a pad or anything. I didn't have my fluffy blanket that I had inside, But so I tried to imagine a warm space, and I asked for help. And I think that this is a really important thing to remember when really immersed in a psychedelic journey. If you're in a stuck place or having a really challenging experience, ask for help. Ask your personal guardian angels, your personal entities, the entities that surround you, the spirit of the plants to help you. And so I did, and I asked the ayahuasca spirits to help me, and suddenly I found myself in this really cozy indoor space. And it was a beautiful room. It had low light. There was a fire burning, and I was sitting there, and in this room was this man. And he looked to be perhaps an indigenous man. He had black hair, and he was very welcoming. And he said, "You said you look cold." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm freezing. I'm shivering underneath this bush." And he said, "I have some soup. I'll be right back." So he goes and he gets me this bowl of soup, and he hands it to me, and I start drinking this soup in my vision, and I'm thinking, wow, this is very cool, and I'm drinking this soup, and when I look up from my soup, and the guy is gone, and where the guy was sitting is suddenly this enormous black cat, a black jaguar. And I was like, wow, I've heard about jaguar visions on ayahuasca. This is pretty cool. And I was a little scared. The cat was very big, and so I sat very still, like you do with wild creatures, and waited for it to acknowledge me. And the cat's tail is kind of going back and forth and back and forth. And but the cat communicated, and it was welcoming, and it said, "Welcome. It's good. You're safe here. This is my home. I hope you're enjoying your soup." And I realized pretty quickly as I sat drinking my soup, looking at this cat, that the cat was playful. You know how you play with your house cat, where the cat will like reach out its paw, and kind of you can sort of play with it. And this cat was like that, except this cat was about 3 times my size, and I was a little scared and kind of blown away by this, but So this cat and I started to play like you would play with a big house cat, and I suddenly had this desire to do the same thing that I do with my cat at home, which is kind of like snuggle up next to your cat. You know, if you're cat owners or you have a dog, like just lie there next to your creature and listen to it purr. And I thought, well, I wonder if this giant cat purrs. And so I asked the cat, I said, well, would it be okay if I like snuggled up next to you? Not too long ago, was lying under a bush in a freezing cold forest in the middle of the Sierras, and I'm feeling better, but, would that be all right? And the cat's like, sure, that's okay. So before I knew it, I was like snuggled up next to this big black cat. And, one thing kind of led to another, and before I knew it, this cat started licking me like a house cat would. Have you ever been licked by your house cat? It's got this rough tongue, right? And it's kind of this funny feeling. It's like a sandpapery tongue. Except this cat's tongue was like the size of that pillow over there. It was like big. And it was just a really erotic experience. And I felt like a baby kitten. And this cat was like my big mama cat. And it was just like licking me and clean, like I was being cleansed by this cat, like a little scruffy kitten would be. And it was really erotic. And this cat started licking me all over, and before I knew it, I was having this very erotic experience with this cat that was treating me like a little kitten. And gotta tell you, it was pretty hot, as an erotic experience and as a vision. And yet at the same time, I was quite aware that this cat was part of the ayahuasca spirit, and that I needed to treat this cat with great respect because it was way more powerful than I was, and that this was a temporary experience, and that I was just going to kind of go with it. And it was delicious. It was playful, and it was warm, and it was a little scary, and I had never seen a cat that big, or been, that I had been really close to, except in a zoo. And it was a really hot psychedelic experience, and really kind of opened my eyes to the potential for being both embodied and disembodied, because I was definitely disembodied. I was someplace else in my vision, and yet I was embodied within this vision, having an erotic experience with another species. And I thought, wow, this is great. If all my ayahuasca experiences are like this, I am so down, I'm like, I'm there. I'll go to Peru. I'll, do whatever. And I never had that experience again with ayahuasca. It was a complete one-off, but it was a hell of a welcome to that spirit ally. And I've often felt that cat kind of with me, in moments where I'm in some sort of distress, or I'm confused, or I need some sort of guardian spirit. Somehow that cat is nearby. I feel like that cat is watching out for me. So that's an example of a disembodied, embodied, erotic, psychedelic vision. And I think we're all capable of having those. I think we can practice invoking them in a certain way. So I want to talk about another substance, and that's Psilocybin mushrooms. Now, the original person who was scheduled for this talk is Shona Home. And Shona is a friend of mine. I'm honored to be her friend. She spoke recently at the Women's Visionary Congress, an event that I founded. And we have an annual gathering of psychedelic women and men. And it happened in June in Northern California. And Shona came and she spoke. And she gave this extraordinary talk about her experiences with psilocybin mushrooms, and about the entities that she has met in her deep mushroom journeys. And Shona, like myself, feel the greatest resonance with mushroom allies of all the psychedelic substances. I've always felt that when I go deep into the mushroom space, I encounter allies that are truly guardian allies and are there to teach me some really profound lessons. And I really try to have a question prepared, because inevitably I'm always there deep in the space, and the mushroom goddess is in front of me, and she's pulsing and she's breathing and she's green and iridescent and, you know, flowing and surging and erotic. And she always says, "So you're here. Hi, nice to see you. Hope the journey was okay. What's your question?" And I always try to have a question prepared for the mushroom goddess, a good one, because she's always like, "Listen, I'm overscheduled, okay? Got a lot going on in the entity world, so, you know, cut to the chase. Give me your question." And I try to have a question prepared. Now, Shona, when she gave her talk at the Women's Visionary Congress, and I'm just hoping that she's okay with me saying this because she said it in a public place. When she gets to this place in her mushroom experience, in a deep place, she is able to have spontaneous orgasms within that mushroom space. Like full on, lying there going, whoo, wow. Full on orgasm, like, whoa, without touching herself. Wow. That's pretty amazing. Like if a pharmaceutical company could make that drug and brand it and sell it, you know, that would make a lot of money for people. Now, not everyone can do that, right? I myself have never had a spontaneous orgasm in a deep mushroom journey, but I'm going to work on it, okay? I think that's like a worthy goal, right? You know, when you get your bucket list for the year and you're like, okay, what are my goals this year? That's one of my goals this year. Like, how can you connect with those entities and those guardian spirits to be unembodied and embodied at the same time, to be able to feel intense physical pleasure in that psychedelic journey space? Whatever Shona Home is doing to get there, I salute her, and I want to go there too. Like alone, with groups of people, whatever, you know, I think it's something to shoot for. And so because Shona was going to speak here, we're going to do a shout out to Shona girl. Keep on rocking those spontaneous orgasms, Shona, and teach us how to do it, okay? Because I think that's something to shoot for. I think that's awesome, and it's possible. So I'm going to look at my notes here and see what else I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah, I want to talk about the aging process, because, you know, none of us are getting any younger. I just turned 52, and I'm like really happy with it. I'm enjoying being that age a whole lot. I feel like I'm just beginning to come into my own power and really manifest a lot of things I've wanted to do in the world. But I really feel like, you know, at 52 you need like a plan for successful aging, right? Because in your 20s, you take it all for granted. In your 30s, you're just raging it hard. Who cares, right? In your 40s, you start to, like, realize that you get sort of the body and the energy that you work for, right? You know, you have to work for it. In your 50s, you have to really work for it. You need to work hard. You need to be actively working out, eating well, to keep your energy level to the place where you can gather enough energy to travel deeply in your psychedelic visions. Because if you don't have that thing together energetically, you can't go as far, and you can't go as deep, and you can't get the kind of insights and lessons that these plant allies can really give you. So I put together kind of a process, a 5-step plan for what I consider to be successful psychedelic aging. And it sort of goes like this. Number 1 is working out hard. You have to work hard. You have to go to the gym. You need to do your yoga. You need to work your body, and you need to stay really strong. There's no shortcuts. The older I get, the more I realize I have to work harder, work out harder, be strong, because you lose bone and muscle mass as you get older, and so you have to compensate for that. And get a trainer, find the thing you love to do. You have to stay physically embodied and grounded in order to leave your body. And so you really need to find whatever exercise and workout plan works for you. And the second thing, and the obvious corollary to that, is eating well. You have to really keep a clean diet to keep your energy level going and strong. And you also need to just treat yourself well. You need to get enough sleep. You need to take your supplements. Do whatever it is to make yourself physically strong, because we all know the body and the mind are connected. You limit yourself to where you can go in your mind by the limitations of your body, and there's just no shortcut around that. The other things that I would recommend for a successful psychedelic aging is a sense of purpose, work that serves the community, something that you really love to do, that really serves you, that makes you feel connected, that enhances the lives of other people, and really makes you feel like your work and your life is meaningful. I think that that's a really essential piece to that. And I also feel that you have to keep a really close connection to the natural world. You have to be able to find time to be outside, outdoors, in the natural environment, connect to the earth. And you also need to be in community. You need to have a strong sense of community. Build your own psychedelic community wherever you are. Build a community of people who support you. And this is part of successful psychedelic aging. And then, of course, there's psychedelics. Now, my role model for successful psychedelic aging is, of course, Albert Hoffman, the creator of LSD. Because Albert Hoffman lived to be over 100 years old. Now, logic would dictate that Albert Hoffman almost certainly used LSD in his aging process to successfully, psychedelically age in a way that allowed him to be an old and yet vigorous man. I had the great pleasure to meet him and to attend a press conference. I, in 1996, went to Basel, Switzerland, and attended his birthday party. And I was there with a group of other reporters. I was a reporter back then. And I got to ask the obvious question. The beautiful thing about being a reporter is that you get to ask the really obvious questions that nobody else wants to ask. And so, of course, you know, the obvious question for Dr. Hoffman on his birthday was, so, Dr. Hoffman, do you feel that LSD has contributed to your longevity? Right? It's the obvious question that no one kind of wants to ask. It's the big elephant in the room. And he was so funny. He drew himself up and through his interpreter, he said, no, absolutely not. It has nothing to do with LSD. It is the muesli and the raw eggs that he eats every morning in his muesli and his Swiss cereal. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, right, you know. And that's what he said, and I respect what he says. But I have also read accounts of Dr. Hoffman using microdoses of LSD to take him to a non-ordinary state of consciousness, low-level microdosing, and using that shift of consciousness in low-level microdoses of LSD to more deeply connect with the natural world. Because remember, Albert Hoffman always said that LSD helped him to deeply connect with the natural world. It was his way of finding out a path, a way into deeply comprehending the beauty and majesty of God and of nature. And he used LSD for this purpose. And I believe that this was a really important piece of his secret to longevity, and it could be ours. If we use small quantities of LSD in collaboration with a healthy lifestyle. Now, here's a guy who went hiking in the Swiss Alps almost every day, was very active, was living in a beautiful, clean environment, was eating a clean diet, doing all the things that I've just suggested as a part of successful psychedelic aging. He also had an inversion table where he hung upside down and got a lot of blood into his brain, which could well have contributed to his intellectual and physical vigor as an old man. But this concept of microdosing, I think, is really, really rich territory, especially for older people. After you've done your heroic doses of whatever psychedelic you fancy, the really interesting place to explore is the microdose. The small enhancement to enhance your reality but allow you to function and as an adjunct to your creativity and your connection to the natural world and your spiritual evolution. So I think that there's a lot of potential there, and I think that gerontology, the study of very old people, is a fascinating topic. I often ask doctors what my own lifespan might be. I'm 52, and I say, hey, given good medical care, healthy diet, exercise, how old do you think I could live? Assuming that medical technology keeps pace and I don't get unlucky and get snuffed in a car accident or something. What do you think is my expected lifespan? And the number that I keep getting back for a healthy American female is about 120. So let's think about that for a second. Wow. I mean, will my IRA, last for 120? Will I be a poor old person, If I'm a poor old person, my IRA runs out and, there's all sorts of conflict in the world and the environment is challenged, etc. I will definitely want to be microdosing. Definitely. I will want to use small, carefully administered doses of LSD to enhance my aging process, to keep me engaged with the world, to keep my deep connection with the natural world, to keep my connection to my community, to love myself enough to take super extra good care of myself as an old person. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic to explore. And I like to think that the elders in our psychedelic community, and I'm not quite there yet, only 52, junior elder, the elders in our community, the people in their late 50s, people in their 60s and 70s and 80s, are really going to be on the cutting edge of this. And my vision, and the thing that I'd like to put out in my talk, is I'd like to envision a day when people who are in old folks' homes, assisted living facilities, have access to psychedelics to be able to push the envelope and do this, to use MDMA to address their trauma, to use LSD to enhance their lives and their aging process, and to use psilocybin to go deep into their journey space and seek out their allies that they will need for the next process, which is death, of course. I've always assumed that the traditional uses of psychedelics in traditional societies were preparation for death. And so old people should not only have access to psychedelic substances for healing, but they should be able to prepare for the dying process. And of course, the Harbor UCLA study that was done with psilocybin with people with end-stage cancer and anxiety studied this very thing, to see whether people approaching death with cancer who are experiencing anxiety at the end of their lives benefited from a spiritual experience with psilocybin? And of course the answer was yes. Big surprise. So I hope for all of us that we can envision a time when we can use these substances to grow old gracefully, to prepare for our dying process, to be strong and both in our bodies and journeyers in the outside world, and to be able to be radiant human beings, fulfilling our full potential and our duties to the planet and other species, and eventually become disembodied in a graceful way as we approach the final threshold into death. So that's what I'd like to leave you with, and I'd be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Unfortunately, we don't have a wireless mic, so if you could just repeat the question.
Yes, I do. I come from a family of scientists, and there's some really good data out there that's being collected about the PTSD studies with Mdma, now the psilocybin studies. The data is pretty compelling. And for people who really respect and feel comforted by science, those studies, I think, are a good place to start. Especially if they have certain conditions such as PTSD or cancer, where they can identify with the subjects of the studies and say, those studies really have demonstrated scientifically the beneficial aspects of those particular substances. Now, if that is not sufficient, or they're not particularly interested in studies because they have anxiety about a certain substance, a lot of people are afraid of psychedelics because it's the fear of going into the shadow world. It's the fear of losing control. It's the fear of death, And I've always thought that women are a little bit better suited to psychedelics because we're socialized to surrender and to letting go and to be receptive to intense experience because we give birth. So if somebody is afraid of that and yet they're curious, starting with a very low dose, doing it with them as a sitter, or having another sitter and you doing it with them as a shared experience in a very carefully controlled and pleasant surroundings. It's always about set and setting, of course, as we know. And in a getting them in a state of mind where they feel that they're not coming into the experience with a great deal of anxiety or fear. Try to bring them into it in a place of acceptance and embrace at a very low dose in an environment where they feel really comfortable. Yes. Why should the pursuit of orgasm be a next step? Well, because it's fun. Because I'm a pleasure activist, right? Because it brings us joy. Because as we age and we encounter sickness and illness and injury, it's really good to experience one's bodies as a joyous thing. Because sometimes you don't have a partner. Because sometimes people are alone. Because we really have to learn how to pleasure ourselves first before we can really bring pleasure to other people. Do believe that. Because it's another type of altered state of consciousness that we can seek and aim for. And because it brings us into another kind of altered space that is an enhancement in the altered space we're already in. And I wish Shona were here to answer that question too. But I think it's a way for us to fully accept ourselves as erotic beings and to and to love ourselves and to forgive ourselves and to allow ourselves to experience real pleasure as a form of self-love. And if we really love ourselves, then we're better at loving other people. We're better at loving the planet. I hope that answers your question. Okay, question. Can I say something about the erotic side of LSD? Yeah, I find LSD pretty damn erotic. Of course, it depends on set and setting, who you're with, how well slept and hydrated you are, the quality of the material. There are a lot of factors, that play into that. I find it's really playful. Sensation and touch is really enhanced. If you can see light trails, that's pretty neat. If you're playing with somebody else's body, it can be very fluid. It can certainly lower inhibitions. I really kind of enjoy it at again, like lower doses, what I call a walking dose, like say 200 mics as opposed to 300, because I feel more embodied at a dose like that and able to engage with another person. So, I think that it's it has a lot of potential that needs to be explored erotically. And I think it's one of those substances for which set and setting is really key. You really have to set your nest. You need to have a warm, cozy place. You have to have your after food prepared in advance so that if you get hungry somewhere in that 12-hour journey, you have some warm food to keep you going, to fuel your fire with. You have to be well hydrated, and you need a place where you feel completely safe. You really need a safe and engaging nest to do that. Now, if you go out there on the playa and have an LSD experience, it's cool. There are lots of blinky lights and fun things to interact with, but at a certain point, what do you want to do? You want to come home and you want to curl up someplace cozy and warm with a nice, cozy, warm person, ideally, and just get cozy and warm together. So you really need to have to make sure that you have that place to do it in and some food prepared in advance. And hydrate, of course, enhances the experience. Yeah. Yeah, I heard Rick Doblin talk today about how soon he expects MDMA to be made legal for doctors and therapists to use. We have over here a board member of MAPS. What's the date that you guys predict?
I think it's like 2021, 2022, sometime like that.
Right. Not too far from now. It'll take a while, but it's coming. They see it. There are several steps that they need to get through in the research process, but they see it very clearly. We'll see it in our lifetime. And what's even better is we'll see it as older people. We as older people will have the benefit of that research. And that's a marvelous thing. Do you have your hand up? The questioner said ketamine is being used in emergency rooms to treat acute depression. That's interesting. Yes. Yes, ibogaine therapy. Yeah. This gentleman from Brazil was just saying that that ibogaine is being used to treat addictions, especially opiate addictions, and that's certainly true. I'm aware of several clinics in Mexico also and also Canada where ibogaine has been quite effective in helping people release themselves from addiction. Yes, true. Yes, over here, you had a question? So smoking cocaine, bazooka, it's called bazooka, and also using cannabis as a way to overcome addiction?
Yes, that's substance, yes.
I see. To opiates. Interesting. Well, a lot of people get into trouble with addictions to various substances, and a lot of therapies have proven pretty ineffective, and so there's a lot of investigation to be done with ibogaine, certainly, and other substances as well. Think of the number of people who get hooked on to Vicodin, just for starters, wildly overprescribed. You go into the hospital for anything, and you've got a full script for Vicodin before you know it. A ton of people get hooked on Vicodin. It's a nasty substance. I had some surgery a few years ago, and I weaned myself off that stuff as soon as I possibly could. You know how I did it? With cannabis. Because cannabis potentiates Vicodin. And if you can ramp down the Vicodin and use cannabis to stop the pain, you can cut your use of Vicodin really quickly and substitute it with cannabis. And that's fact. And I did it, and it was very effective. Cannabis in general I find to be, it's not strictly a psychedelic, but it's a very useful ally. I find it, because I'm not particularly interested in alcohol, I like cannabis as a social drug. I like it as an erotic drug. I like it as an ally for meta-thinking. It's a very good ally. Yes. The question is, with entheogens and longevity, what do people think of Terence McKenna's illness? He died of brain cancer. Myoblastoma? Correct? Did I get that right? Yeah. It looks like a mushroom in the brain and imagery that I've seen. It's really, very interesting. Well, people have been doing psilocybin mushrooms for a very long time. There doesn't appear to be any direct causal link between psilocybin mushroom use and brain cancer, and so I would deduce that that was a one-off experience. Unfortunate and sad, but, people get unlucky with cancer all the time. So not unusual in that regard. I remember somebody saying, do you think it was all your, do you think that cannabis might have a prophylactic effect on cancer? And he said, if that's true, I wouldn't have this condition or something like that, because he was a fan of cannabis as well. I think that's unknowable. We just don't know. He was a very interesting guy. He got unlucky. Happens to a lot of people. He was just better known than most. I hate to be so cut and dried about it, but that's pretty much the truth of it. Yes. I agree with you. The questioner noted that I said that I didn't consider cannabis a psychedelic, but it, of course, can have a powerful psychedelic effect done at the right dosage. And I think that's definitely true, especially when people eat it. Right. Yeah, I think that's true. I tend not to do cannabis in that way, and so I don't personally consider it a psychedelic, but certainly it can have that effect. Absolutely. I agree. Yes. Wow. So the questioner said that Terence said that the absence of smoking cannabis for 24 hours when he went back to it had a psychedelic effect for him. How interesting. Everyone's brain chemistry is different. Isn't that a beautiful, elegant piece of natural engineering? Thank you, Mother Nature. Yes. That's an interesting question. There's a new biography of Albert Hoffman that is out where it talks about the size of those dosages, I believe. As I understand it, at 200 mics, pretty standard dose for people who want a full-on effect. That microdose might be considered, say, 40 mics, or maybe even 20. Measuring it out, of course, tricky. But if you're determined, you can do it. And I would like to see somebody measuring out microdoses for that exact purpose. Yes, in the back. Absolutely. 25 mics would be a nice microdose. Yes, Ssris. That would put a little twinkle in your day. I was once a house guest at a lovely, beautiful house, and the hostess looked over at me at breakfast in the morning. Lovely, elegant lady, beautiful, grand house. And she said, "Oh, will you be microdosing with us this morning?" And I thought, I am definitely in the right house, in the right place with the right people. Other questions? No more questions. I've got a question for you. How many people here have had an erotic experience on or with psychedelics? Woo, that's 2 hands. Yes! We have a significant number of people here who have had an erotic experience on psychedelics. So I wish you all many more erotic experiences on psychedelics as you get older, and many, many more interesting investigations that you can add to the collective pool of knowledge that we share. Thank you very much.